Howdy, class. Humanities 2, as we trips our way through the arts that make us who we are. Humanities 2, Shasta College. I'm almost finished with your last essays. People are still making two grave mistakes. Now it's Halloween. I could use the word grave. You're still not writing 3 pages. Why? You can write 3 pages. It's possible. Or more. Please do. Go for it. Keep analyzing. Also, when I assign a documentary, I kind of want you guys to critically examine and analyze what you saw in the documentary and try to piece it together through your critical thinking, not just go to a website like Britannia or Wikipedia and just randomly type in the facts of somebody's life, because that's not analyzing anything. When I say, why do they matter? Why does Rembrandt matter? Why does Sam Shepard matter? Why does Shakespeare matter? It's not when they were born, when they died. That's not what matters. It's the creative output they did, that their stamp on our culture, that matters. So use an example. A lot of people wrote on the Beethoven one that he created rock and roll music, and and I know right where that is. I know the web page you got that off of. The influences with heavy metal bands and the Beach Boys or whoever. Okay, but what about his music? Not the Beach Boys or Judas Priest music. What about Beethoven's music in his time? From the documentary I ask you to look at. You can go research other things. I hope you do. Everything's not in the documentary, believe me. But I need you to kind of figure some of this stuff out yourself. You don't have to be right. There's no right or wrong. I like just to see the creative, critical analysis. That's what I'm looking for. That will get you a paper every time. Some of you have been late. That's cool. Just let me know. We've got COVID to deal with. We've got personal issues to deal with. Just give me a heads up. And what I usually let you do is email it to me as an attachment. You probably lose a couple points for being late. The reason why I need to do that is because everybody else who gets their paper in on time shouldn't be punished for getting their paper in on time. You should, I hate to say it, lose some points for being late. That's just how it goes, folks. Anyway, I hope you guys are keeping up in your journals. Keep those weekly journals going. Don't get in a big panic at the end wondering what happened to the journal. Anyway, I think we're in the midterm next week. I'm not sure what I'm going to do next week. But this week, I know what I'm doing, because in a couple of days is Halloween. And if you've seen my announcements, and I hope you're watching those documentaries, I posted another one tonight. And then I'll post this lecture also, exploring the origins of Halloween. Did y'all go trick-or-treating when you were kids? Do you know trick-or-treating, what that's all about? Do you know why we put on funny masks or dress up? Why is it called Halloween? What's the origin of it? So I posted another, hopefully that documentary I posted kind of covers all that. But if it doesn't, you can always research it. But most of it goes back hundreds of years ago to pagan rituals, some of it, to harvest time. Absolutely. There was a lot of superstition around harvest time. People wanted their crops to come in. And so they had celebrations, they had parties, they had rituals, dancing around bonfires, getting kind of wiggy and crazy. And essentially, hopefully, the gods will listen to give them a good crop. Later on, Christianity got in there, it always does, and it kind of switched. Now we've got, for example, jack o' lantern. Do you even call it that? You just call it a pumpkin with a scary face? Well, in harvest times, the pumpkin was a very sought after um, harvested item. And they carved the face and lit it up from inside, and it was sort of a ritual. The jack o' lantern was a folklore invention of a soul, a lost soul that was trapped between heaven and hell. Think about that, folks. Between heaven and hell. Where's that? You tell me. Anyway, so there's a lots of interesting historical things involving Halloween, and this is the humanities class that we're talking about how the culture is reflected into our art, into our rituals. And there's a lot of art in horror. There's horror in paintings. Absolutely. Just look at, I wish I could name more right now, but I'm thinking mostly of Munch's Scream. Maybe you know that painting. Or the literature of Mary Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein at a very young age. Movies really took over horror. You know what the first movie was, horror genre, they think? Oh, let's see. Yeah, George Millet, who directed many really cool early cinema. This is about 1896. That's how early it was in France. He directed also when we do film, and we're going to do that in a couple of weeks. One of the more interesting films ever made, Trip to the Moon. He did a movie called House of the Devil, 1896. People like to be shocked. Why? I want you to keep asking yourself when you look at the documentaries assigned or the paper I'm going to assign, uh, why do we like to feel fear? Do we? Do you? I mean, look at movies. Horror's been around for since the beginning of cinema, over 100 years, and it's more popular than ever before. Do you have a favorite horror genre? Do you like slasher films like Saw 1 and 2, or do you like more psychological films where you don't see a monster who's slicing people up? Do you like those films? Do you look forward to them? They're everywhere now. They're on TV, miniseries, Netflix. We can't get enough haunted house stories. What does this say about our culture? When you look at the history of horror, there's usually something going on in the culture that is reflecting, whether it's a warfare, plague, absolutely. Natural disasters, conflicts with devils. Do you believe in the devil? Do you think such Satan exists? The pandemic has really elevated horror. There's more horror movies being now than ever made before. Horror fiction, horror comic books, because these are kind of frightful times. And so our art reflects that. Do you need to watch a horror film to have an outlet? Do you need to feel fear? Let me ask this question. Do you like roller coasters? Some hate them. Some love them. Do you like bungee jumping? Extreme mountain biking? Any sports that's extreme that could take you to the verge of death? Even skateboarding in a swimming pool could lead you to your early death. The adrenaline rush, is that living? Is everything else boring unless you have that adrenaline rush? You tell me. Do you need it? Does it make you feel alive? When you get off a roller coaster, you're exhilarated and you're probably happy to still be alive. Do you have to be taken to the threshold of death to be happy, to appreciate life? Do you believe in ghosts? Do you? Do you hear things in the night that you can't explain? Do you see things out of the corner of your eyes like your cats? You have a cat? Do you ever see them staring at the corner like my cats do? What are they staring at? Do they see something we don't see? Do they hear something we're not hearing? Cats seem frightened a lot. Look at their faces. What are they saying? I mean, they have to survive and they can be eaten and killed easily. So that's always there. Survival is important. So many of our horror films is about surviving, whether we're running from Michael from Halloween or Freddy from Freddy's Nightmare. We're running from something that's trying to destroy us. You ever see Texas Chainsaw Massacre? Truly horrifying movie. It's truly horrifying, folks. The original. I'm not talking about the remakes because they get too slick later on. The original was like it really happened. It looks like a documentary. And that makes it more horrifying with disturbing images, not just of this psychopath with a mask made out of human flesh with a chainsaw. Nobody wants to die getting hit with a chainsaw. At least no one I know. But these films are made. Classic horror films from every decade has their own genre of horror films. Like in the 30s, we were just we're in the Depression. And so nobody's feeling too good about things. Everybody's having a hard time to pay their rent. And in Germany, a person by the name of Adolf Hitler was starting to come to power. And he was starting to spread some pretty awful news. This is before social networking. But we were hearing things over here. We didn't want to hear these things, but we were. And so horror films, in a way, in Hollywood, came about, and they were popular because of the Depression. People needed to escape the realities of the horror of the real reality of trying to pay their rent. That's horrifying. That'll give you some sleepless nights more than any ghost. Paying your rent. Reality of life is terrifying, fear-inducing. You wake up in the morning, everything seems better because everything's bad at night. You know why? Simple. We can't see at night. What goes on at night is a mystery. So, in the Depression era, we made essentially monster movies like Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, The Mummy, Dracula, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, The Invisible Man. We could fight Frankenstein's monster. We couldn't fight Hitler. It was a metaphor for fighting the rise of Nazism that was sweeping across Europe. In a little while, we're not going to be able to avoid it. We're going to have to confront it. You know, one of the first comic books, Superman comic book, action comic book, where he's introduced, you know who he's fighting? He's not fighting Lex Luthor or aliens from space. He's fighting Nazis. It came out about 1938, around in there. If you could get one of those issues, they're worth $30, $40 million if you have one laying around the house. Same thing with Wonder Woman. She was fighting Nazis. See, we could fight Nazis in a comic book, but we didn't know how to fight them yet until World War II broke out. And then literally hell on earth, the horror was on earth. Frankenstein's monster, Hitler, was roaming the earth. It was only a matter of time before we destroyed him, but it destroyed a lot of lives, a lot of cultures. You know, we like to be taken to the edge often. I used to mountain bike, pretty serious, until I got my broken foot and had to have surgery, and that kind of curtailed my activities because I didn't feel like getting a broken back. But I would ride with people who were, I would say, extreme. I rode with somebody once. He was way out in front of me, and he went off literally a ledge and landed in a manzanita bush that was full of broken branches. And he was this close to getting impaled with one right through his cheek. It was right here, and it was lodged. And he was stuck there. And I pulled him out of there. He was not injured badly, shaken up, yes. And the first thing he said was, "Wow, that's living." And I said, "How was that living? How was crashing like that, almost having your jaw impaled by a tree branch? How is that living?" Well, to his, you got to push it to the edge. And then I knew I wasn't cut out for the extreme. I don't need that. I can imagine that. I don't need to experience it. Some people do. That's why they skydive. That's why they do risky things. Are you one of those people that go out to Whiskey Town Lake and you jump off that bridge into the lake? You know, I just thought I'd tell you, there are pylons underneath that water you can't see. Over the years, people have hit those things, and it kills them quick. Just think about that before you jump off the bridge. Why do we do it? The thrill? The adrenaline rush? Do we need that to live? Perhaps. Perhaps. And that's why horror matters. Because man is in a constant state of disruption. Look at the last 2 years with the coronavirus. The pandemic is pretty horrifying, folks. We got to wear masks. We got to wash our hands. We got to walk amongst people who might be sick and dying and coughing on us, or we're coughing on them. And that's an unseen horror. That's not Michael from Halloween coming at us with a big knife and a mask. We could see that. We can't see the virus. And so we feel helpless and not in control. But when you go to a movie, a horror movie, it's not happening to you. That's happening to people up there on the screen. You're out of it. We're safe. We're not going to be killed in the cabin out by the lake. The people on the screen are. And so there's a voyeuristic element to it. Absolutely. We like seeing others getting horrified, terrified. You ever seen The Exorcist, the original 73 Exorcist? It's horrifying. It's stayed with me for 50 years. You don't forget it. The images. 12-year-old girl possessed by Satan, her head spinning around, vomiting, masturbating with a crucifix. Those are powerful images, terrifying images. And the actress was 12 years old. It really affected her. Yes, her mother was right off camera, but she didn't know what she was doing half the time. She was too young to understand it. Horror Horror is not my favorite genre at all. I don't really care for it. Um, I've read a couple terrifying books. They stick with you forever, by the way. The language, the images, if they're powerful. Same with films. They're etched in our memory banks. I don't need to feel the adrenaline rush. I'd rather avoid it, to tell you the truth. But new horror movies are opening up at the movie theater every night. They're on Netflix, they're on Apple TV, everywhere. Don't go into that room. That's pretty basic. Pretty basic. And they keep coming up with new ways to terrify us. So, horror has been in our paintings, our literature. It's in Shakespeare, folks. Macbeth. He's confronted with otherworldly witches, they call them the Wicked Sisters, who are predicting his future. Is it really happening? Is it his imagination? Hamlet, folks, he talks to his ghost of his dead father, who comes to warn him. By the prick of your thumb, something wicked this way comes. They believed in witches and ghosts in Shakespeare's time, and so they were open to that. It wasn't some fantasy like it is in Hollywood right now. Midsummer's Night's Dreams. It's all about pixies and sprites, spirits playing out in the woods at night. You have to suspend your disbelief, and you have to accept it, or you won't enjoy it. And if you can't, then you don't get it. That's okay. A lot of people can't. So it's been around theater, paintings, composers. Come on, listen to Beethoven. Da 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 da. How often is that used in a horror movie? Those four notes, because it evokes something otherworldly. It evokes an emotion. Well, somebody like Beethoven, who was going deaf, was experiencing his own private horror movie before they had movies, and it came out in his music. Then we have a brilliant painter like Vincent Van Gogh, who painted beauty, and he was mentally ill, probably schizophrenic before we knew what it was, before he had medications, at least bipolar. The horror that was in his head did not come out in his paintings. He painted beauty. Or did he? Jackson Pollock, who we're going to cover in the next week or so, abstract expressionist painting, raging alcoholic. Does it show in his paintings? Perhaps. Look at Salvador Dali's paintings. There's some terrifying images there. Surreal, drug-induced images. Man has always in a way, needed fear and horror. Because the real deal, folks, like what just happened in Afghanistan, is more horrifying than any monster that could come into your bedroom at night. The real deal is man horror against his fellow man. It's always been like that. Spanish Inquisition, they had really clever tortures. They thought of tortures you can't even imagine. They did, and they did it. Hitler's Nazis, they experimented on live patients, medical procedures on live humans because they were Jews and they figured they were subhumans. Horror is on walking the earth. It's with us every minute. It's the next guy who's going to go into Walmart, shoot the place up. So that's why it matters. And that's why trying to understand man's nature matters. And I hope I could get that through to you guys in this class. Trying to understand our better nature and our worse nature. You need to understand them both. You can't have light without dark. And on that note, welcome to Fright Night.